Joined today by Scott Clements, the head of Tribeca's Asia business. Scott, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David. Great to be here, and thanks for coming up to the conference again this year.
Being based here in Singapore, you have a unique opportunity to see where money is being deployed throughout Asia and by Asian investors. Where is it going, and what are the trends you're seeing?
Well, the reason we set up this conference a year ago with our partners at Vertical Events was because we wanted to obviously, raise the profile of our own brand here in Singapore and the broader region, but also because from experience, having lived here for more than 20 years, I think there hasn't historically been a lot of investment into natural resource equities, and partly because it's not a big sector on the local exchange here, and I think it's just not native to, it's not that integral to most people's lives. And so the main purpose of the conference has been to increase the understanding amongst investors in the space, but to do so in a way that attracts more interest than if it were the type of conference you would see in Australia, for example. There's a lot of interest in decarbonization and the energy transition, and a lot of the investors have started looking at that more from a technology side, and so we're introducing, obviously opportunities around that at the conference, but also make them understand some of the opportunities at the upstream level as well.
How important is it for investors to understand that it is a chain? It might start at a mine and end in a battery or end in a product, but investing is in the chain, not just in the end product.
Yeah, it's very important. That's exactly right, and that's the message that we try to get across in different ways, because I think most people don't really understand what's in their iPhone and where all these things come from, or in an electric vehicle. And I think during COVID, the disruption to supply chains focused people's attention a bit more on these issues. And we've seen another shipping disruption with that horrible accident in the US this week as well. And so I think getting people to understand that things don't just magically appear as a finished product, that's a pretty key part to the whole thing. And in my opening address the other day at the conference, I tried to get that point across, that people are focusing on AI and the downstream parts of energy transition, but there's this whole upstream story that's a big part of that and really important, and having the commodities that are necessary to do all the things downstream that people are looking at. And we would argue that's where you have the opportunity to make extraordinary profits as an investor as well.
And are you seeing changes to the investor appetite to look at those opportunities?
Yeah, I think we are. And I think, again, I brought up the example of Azure Minerals, who spoke here at the conference 1 year ago, and they were trading at 34 cents at the time. And Tony, who runs that company, he had Singaporean investors invest during that week at the conference, and actually made his share price go up 10 cents, which he was very happy about. And but between 1 year ago and today, he's gone up 10 times, and obviously been taken out by SQM and Hancock. So we want to promote those types of stories to investors here, because I think, in particular, the high net worth retail investors, they love those great stories that with very quick gratification. And I think a lot of investors, especially younger ones, think you can only do that in crypto or tech stocks or something. So we want to get them having a bit more awareness that it exists in the resource markets as well.
And do the companies need to adapt how they present their story to Asian investors?
That's a good question, and the answer is yes, because you don't have the same depth of knowledge of geology as you would if you were talking to a Perth-based investor who's grown up with it. So I think you need to set the stage for your commodity and the geography that you're in, and these basic sort of building blocks of the story first, and then get into the more specific things. Because in a way, you're probably selling the sector or your commodity first to a lot of these newer investors, and then your specific company, second, I would say.
How big is the opportunity for ASX listed companies to access capital here in Asia?
It's a huge opportunity, and from the big institutional pools of capital that are here and elsewhere, the sovereign wealth funds, the pensions, very large institutions. I mean, Singapore is the financial hub of the region, and so you have representatives of global firms, you have Canadian pension funds, you have a lot of institutional capital. And then on top of that, we've seen a massive growth in family offices here in Singapore over the past 2 or 3 years. A lot of that coming from North Asia. And so, and Singapore itself has always been a hub for wealth. And so the opportunity is huge. It takes some time and effort to engage, and you need to think about it a bit differently than you would in your domestic market as a company, I would say. And but the sky's the limit, and I think the investment thesis around energy transition is pretty well understood now, and people are set up and ready to deploy, and they're evolving their thinking about how to do that. And again, I mean, I think an analogy we make is that during China's industrialization, the people who made the most money were the people developing upstream resources more than the people who were deploying those resources downstream. And so I think getting that message across that it can be a very, very lucrative place to invest is part of the process. And we're seeing people that have mandates to invest in energy transition who started downstream, and we're talking to them about moving upstream, because that's where we think they can make the most money as investors, frankly.
We'll get out the crystal ball. What does the next 12 to 24 months look like from an investing point of view here in Asia?
I think it's a pretty good time. I mean, if you're talking about commodity markets, they're always quite cyclical and sometimes violently so. We run a nuclear opportunities fund, and it's had great performance because of the increase in the price of uranium, but we would argue, and it was talked about on the panel the other day, that there's still a lot of upside in uranium prices. So we think that with all the attention that nuclear is getting as a energy transition power source and stable baseload clean power, that will draw more people into the sector, and it's a very small sector, for example. Copper is a metal that everybody likes, and I think there'll be more and more generalists investing in the copper space and looking for opportunities there. And then in the battery materials, I think Joe Lowry was speaking at the event, and he's got some very deep experience in the commodity, and he and others would argue that lithium is a long-term bull market, and it had a massive pullback last year, but the end users still want a secure supply, and they're it's cheap in the equity markets right now. So you never know what the next 12 months will hold, but I think I think people will focus more and more on the upstream in this energy transition trade, and I think Australia, it is the biggest opportunity set in the broader Asia Pacific region. So if you're an investor here, it's the first place you're going to look.
Tribeca clearly leading the way here in Asia. Scott, we always appreciate your time. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks very much. We'll see you again next year.